Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where Hollywood is barreling towards a reckoning. But it seems like they've been barreling towards a reckoning for a while now. Hollywood, particularly executives, are gripped by fear. Almost like a deer in the headlights type situation. Or, nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news, because they shoot messengers. So, how bad does it have to get before Hollywood maybe, can no longer ignore it? You are starting to see some changes in leadership, some executives changing up, but that doesn't necessarily mean things are going to change. I think it's we're going to discuss it, and also, it's hard to kind of pivot a whole industry, but I think I don't even think we see a big effort to pivot, at least. Well, a little. You're starting to see little things. So let's discuss what's going on right now. So with the rise of streaming, of course, it had seemed like you now needed to spend money to make money at the multiplex. But just because you spend a lot of money on a movie doesn't mean that the audience will still consider it worthy of seeing in theaters. I mean, unless they want to start putting price tags on the posters, but that just might make audiences hate Hollywood even more. Yes, the disconnect between Hollywood and their customer gets wider and wider. I've always said that Hollywood is one of those businesses where they don't sample their own product. A lot of the people, particularly the executives, and even some creatives, but they're not people who go to the movies every weekend themselves. But Hollywood is having trouble getting people to buy movie tickets, to click on content, and even watch the Oscars. As recent, and sure enough, the Academy was like, woo, we're up a percentage point. And you're like, you're still down by 50% from your heyday. And I'm not talking like there was no television back then. But, as recently as 2014, which is about 10 years ago, 40 million people were tuning into the Oscars. But these days, Hollywood is lucky to get half. Lucky. That is an incredible drop in interest. I mean, there are certainly a number of reasons that people aren't tuning into the Oscars anymore. Why didn't you watch the Oscars? But bottom line, I heard from a lot of people they simply had not seen many of the movies that were nominated. How many of the Best Picture nominees did you see going into the Oscars? And then for the few films that people did see, they get very little, if any, respect. They went up to 10 nominations to try and fix that after The Dark Knight was snubbed. But they still, I think, audiences are not stupid as much as Hollywood likes to think so. They know that these are meaningless nominations and that the films have no chance of actually winning. I think, at first it was nice to see the films get nominated, but now audiences have realized that there's no chance that they're going to actually win. So you're just using them to try and get viewership, and audiences are too savvy to fall for that. Let's take Wicked. All right, so Sean Baker made a very big, moving speech about saving the theatrical experience. I'm like, hey, Sean, why don't you make movies then that a large number of people want to see? But that's fine. Someone has to hold up the art part of the craft. But the movie that did do a really great job in 2024 of getting audiences into theaters, I mean, a couple of movies did, but the one that created an event was Wicked. Sean Baker didn't even say anything about that. That's crazy. And by the way, Wicked was became one of the main reasons they were trying to get you to tune into the Oscars. They did not do the actual songs. They didn't perform the actual songs that were nominated because no one cared about those songs. So they said, we're just going to have, it's really hypocritical. They put Wicked in there. They celebrate James Bond, but those films are not actually getting awards. They walked away with a couple. Wicked had 10 nominations, but it only got 2 wins for costume design and production design. I mean, deserved, but Wicked is a much better film than that. I'm just saying. All right, so back to budgets, though. I want to talk about budgets, throwing money at the screen. Mickey 17 cost $118 million. The upcoming Snow White movie, rumors have it around $250. And even streaming is stuck in this hot mess, with the Russo brothers' Electric State costing $320 million, which just got hit with the giantest of Rotten Tomatoes. Have the Russo brothers lost their mojo? Or are they only good at making Marvel movies? We're going to find out. Oh my goodness. I can't, it's crazy that Kevin Feige, although, I don't know, some recent leaks seem to show that they are perhaps cooking. Although, I do wonder if, medieval MCU might seem silly to non-comic book fans, although comic book fans are like, it's perfect. Speaking of Marvel movies, due to the strikes and reshoots, Captain America Brave New World is maybe one of the most expensive Marvel movies. Disney insists it's in fact one of the cheapest to make, saying its budget is just $180, although many industry rumors say that it could be almost double that in terms of what they spent on making the movie. But even playing along with Disney's number, sure, we'll say 180. That would put the break-even point at 425. And Captain America Brave New World doesn't look like it's even going to hit that. Oh my goodness. In fact, it will likely finish at just around 400 million worldwide, perhaps a scooch over or even maybe under, which puts it right in the thick of the MCU pandemic films, and more than the Marvels, that's no trick, although it was close, and less than Quantumania, which was a reckoning for Marvel. And while Disney isn't saying anything publicly, who can blame them, they've already started to make changes that we're seeing. For instance, they're dialing back on Disney Plus content for their major verticals because Captain America Brave New World was undercut by relying on audiences having to have seen Falcon and Winter Soldier. Also, if you can, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free or at a set price for the streaming service? I think they're starting to see that perhaps Disney Plus might have done real damage. Although some, obviously the two biggest grossing films last year were from Disney, but I do think that they obviously have identified that is a concern. And they started this new way to promote Thunderbolts as their A24 film. Real cute, particularly because Disney doesn't make any artistic films. But A24 films don't bring in a lot of money at the box office because they have niche appeal. And look, I'm all for making a gritty A24 style MCU movie. And Thunderbolts, it's being said to also have a low budget. They're saying it's at $150, but $150 would be very high for an A24 style comic book movie. If you want to talk A24 style comic book movies, let's talk 2019's Joker. And that movie was made for just $55 million. And that's the kind of budget where you can really afford to take some risks. Where the studio heads go, it's not worth arguing with Todd Phillips. Maybe they should have argued with him a little more on Joker 2. We're going to talk about that stuff in a little bit. That's a really good budget to take some real risks. When you're in like 55, that's beautiful. And the movie ended up with $1 billion and a Best Actor Oscar. More respect than Wicked. So that's, I question as to how risk-taking Thunderbolts really is. I mean, we'll see. I think that the success of that kind of ad campaign or framing device for selling a movie depends on whether or not the product actually delivers that. Although Disney's maybe is like, we don't care, we'll have that money at that point. But I'm like, no, because again, you want that longevity. We'll see. Well, what do you think? What did you think of that switch and how they're presenting or framing Thunderbolts to audiences? Matt Damon on Hot Ones a while back, as you might recall, did a fantastic job explaining that the death of physical media, the loss of that revenue stream, that was a huge revenue stream, huge, changed the business for better. Why that killed the mid-range movie. And Vince Vaughn, just recently on Hot Ones, he talked about a number of things. He largely talked, he said, for instance, talking about scared executives, that had killed the R-rated comedy. But also with the rise of IPs, brands, Hollywood was no longer telling stories that had, universal commonality. Vince Vaughn used, I think 16 Candles talking about, John Hughes was very big in this space. About going to prom. Everybody goes to prom, so everybody can relate to the movie. And not just when it comes out, but forever. It becomes, something that everybody watches at that stage of their life. Now, my example would be Home Alone, which is a much bigger movie than 16 Candles ever was, but also from John Hughes. So again, talent is a big part of this. You need that special talent that's going to be able to create these successes. But, is Hollywood even an ecosystem that would allow such a talent to emerge? A lot of people think that if you're talented, you will rise to the top in Hollywood. There are so many people who couldn't make it in Hollywood who are super talented. It's a scary business. All right, so Home Alone. That is obviously has a commonality to it. Everybody spends Christmas or the holidays with extended family, or a lot of people do, and everyone can have a very difficult time. Obviously, they added high concept elements to it, but that's the heart of the movie and why it's so relatable and has stood the test of time. And ironically, because it was so successful, now it has become an IP itself, and Hollywood covets it. But today they would never make Home Alone, and so I think that's a big part of what Matt Damon and Vince Vaughn are speaking to. So speaking of theories, here's my theory for Hollywood going forward. IP's not going to go away, nor should it. It's successful. But that shouldn't be the only type of movie that Hollywood makes. They should start making more movies that have under $100 million budget, and they're not all going to hit, but a couple of them will, and they'll hit so well that they'll pay for all the other movies that didn't hit. Although, of course, again, physical media really relieved a lot of the risk. And so but I mean, it'll help the streaming services. And, I don't think it's how much money. I mean, I think obviously you want to have a big splashy blockbuster, but sometimes, what's a movie recently that came out that you can think of that wasn't a big budget, but which really captured people's attention in theaters? I mean, it can still happen. I think you have to not be so pessimistic and so negative and down on Hollywood and audiences. You have to think, what would excite audiences? For instance, Jaws. Jaws is an extremely successful movie. Jaws created the blockbuster, and I looked it up, and if you factor in inflation, Jaws had about a $50 million budget. So it seems like 55 million is a really nice sweet spot. The Mask made for 34, if you adjust for inflation, $34 million budget. But anyway, this is how Hollywood used to work. They would, and also there was the, physical media was kind of underwriting the business. But, you would put out a bunch of movies and the big wins would pay for all the other ones. And that's how Hollywood has operated from Jaws to up until now with the age of streaming and nostalgia. So what do you think of what's going on with Hollywood right now? And do you think they're right to just what do you think of their decision or strategy, I guess is the right word, to just throw money at the multiplex? Okay, so Mickey 17's not looking so good, opening with just 19 million and pretty poor audience scores. A movie can always rally, but the audience scores are really bad. That's what made me realize that Captain America: Brave New World that was cooked, because the audience scores show whether or not this movie's gonna not only have legs, but if anyone's going to like it down the line. Although there's always somebody who likes a movie from Bong Joon-ho. So back in the day, speaking of physical media, Mickey 17 would find its niche fandom that loved it and would buy the DVD and the Blu-rays and the box set, and it would eventually make money for Warner Brothers. But now, you can stream it on Max for no extra cost in just a few months, and I bet that's what most people are going to wait to do. I mean, obviously it'll hit digital before that, but it's really going to probably be seen by most people. Well, not Max, probably when it hits Netflix, but maybe about a couple more months or a year after that, because, Warner Brothers is putting a lot of their stuff on Netflix, where it's doing better than it is on their own streaming service. All right, so Mickey 17 is on par with other recent intellectual sci-fi films, to be fair, like The Creator and Ad Astra. And I like both those films, by the way, more than Mickey 17. Mickey 17, I said in my review, was really only worth seeing for Robert Pattinson's performance. But while Gareth Edwards proved he can make a really good-looking blockbuster for cheap, that allowed him to move on. And he only because David Leitch had creative differences with the new Jurassic franchise. So, and also a lot of it sometimes boils down to timing. So they were like, Universal and Steven Spielberg are like, what are we going to do? We need a director. They really have rushed Jurassic World Rebirth. I've never seen a big blockbuster made so quickly. And Gareth Edwards was the man for the job. He could make it fast and he could make it cheap. Although when you have the triangle of getting things done, that means that quality is not going to be there. Hopefully Gareth Edwards is one of the only people ever to hit all three sides of the triangle of delivery. All right. But maybe James Gray and Bong Joon-ho just aren't mainstream filmmakers. It's a skill. Another comparison I've seen to Mickey 17 is Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity. Yet remember, One of the reasons that that film did so well is that it was the next film after Avatar to extensively use advanced 3D technology. People went to see that movie in theaters, not just because, it was getting good reviews, but because they wanted to see the 3D technology. That was a big deal. Remember 3D? Although James Cameron's single-handedly keeping it alive. Also, it starred Sandra Bullock at the height of her comeback. But to Cuarón's credit, it's not like Gravity was a fluke. He knows how to make a mainstream film when he wants to. Speaking of Home Alone, Christopher Columbus did a magical job establishing the Harry Potter franchise. But as the audience started to grow up and Harry Potter himself entered his teenage years, Cuarón was brought in to give it that edge, to make it not seem like it was for babies. But he did a great job. He really delivered. People were just on the cusp of being like, is this a franchise for babies? And then they were like, no, Cuarón gave it that edge. Although who's to say Bong Joon-ho even wanted to make a commercial film? I think Warner Brothers was willing him to make a commercial film, and he just did not participate. And perhaps that's another problem Hollywood is facing. As I said, studio suits are scared. Social media, advancements in technology. Who's driving the business side of things? As we always discuss, Hollywood is the most effective when there's a balance between business and creative. And the reason I bring up social media is that, Hollywood, high-stress businesses, and not just Hollywood, but they've always had a lot of clashing of big personalities. And it used to be that those, again, watch The Offer, watch The Studio that's coming up. I'm very excited about that. I'll review it this week. But you can see the difference in the way the industry works in between those two time periods. Now, there's a very good chance that your argument will end up on social media. And, Hollywood suits are not a sympathetic group. And so you could very likely get canceled. And so I think that's affecting what Hollywood suits are willing to say to the creatives. But, creatives need the guidance, because they don't want to have a flop movie. I mean, look at these scores. Bong Joon-ho didn't deliver on his end either. I mean, what do you think? Who dropped the ball when it comes to Mickey 17? Is it perhaps everyone? All right, so as for the rest of the top 10, well, aside from Mufasa, and that sure made a lot of money at the end of the day, and Nora, which had a huge surge thanks to all those Oscar wins, I see a lot of movies here just waiting to be put out to digital. This is like the digital waiting room, and that's a sad thing for the state of Hollywood. How many of these movies would you say demand to be seen on the big screen? And you don't have to have a big budget to demand to be seen on the big screen. Look at Jaws, as I said. These days, it seems like film going is being driven not by the movies, but by habit and circumstance. So let's discuss that. So there's habit. And it's for those of us who just like going to the movies. And we try to go every weekend if possible. Although lately, I have friends and family who, also like to go to the movies every weekend, but have started to skip a weekend here and there, which, just a few years ago would have been it would not have happened. And then there's circumstance, like holidays or summer. Nobody needs to go to the movies in January, February. But like for March, for instance, is spring break. So people should want to go to the movies. They're like, oh, we're off from school. We're families doing stuff. Let's go to the movies. And Snow White and Minecraft are hoping to capitalize on that. We'll see if circumstance is strong enough to drive people to see movies that they so far don't seem to be feeling. That's how Hollywood sometimes gets you. A long time ago when I was just starting out, I did a little comedy sketch about Terminator, the Christian Bale one. And I was like, this movie looks so awful. Nobody wants to see it. But it was Memorial Day weekend. And it's like, what are you going to do? Stay home? Although, of course, these days, people have a lot more options to do besides going to the movies than they used to. Poor Hollywood. Hollywood's like, it used to be we were the only game in town. So do you think you'll cave? Do you think you'll see Snow White and or Minecraft in theaters? All right, so by the way, I just want to touch on experience once again, because, I talked about habit and circumstance and all these other factors, but I really continue to believe that experience is such a big part why the movie business is suffering. I went to see Mickey 17 again yesterday, and I ran into a BTT, member of the BTT community. Hey, hello there. And while I saw it in Dolby, I love Dolby theaters. And it was a packed house because it was New York City. So everybody was going to see Mickey 17. Art house movies play very well here. I had to sit through like 20 minutes of trailers and ads, which, by the way, makes everyone come late. And that's also something that I realized yesterday is really bad for the movie-going business. Because I looked around right before the lights went down and you would think nobody was going to see that movie, but it was almost a sold out showing. So people trickle in while the lights are down, but you don't feel it. It doesn't feel like a party. It feels like, we didn't have to be here. And I think it makes going to the movies feel less exciting. And I think that's a problem as well. Also, AMC changed their popcorn and it tastes awful. I couldn't finish my popcorn yesterday. I was like, this just isn't good. And they might argue it's healthier, but popcorn with nothing on it tastes better than whatever they're serving. And Mickey 17, aside from Robert Pattinson's performance, again, it's not that great a movie. It was a pretty bleak experience. And I do wonder if that maybe carries over to like Novocaine. Like maybe Novocaine would do better if it wasn't following Mickey 17. How about you? After a bad movie-going experience, do you take a break or do you just roll with the punches? Because again, habit. Habit is a big part of it. As for Robert Pattinson, I think he'll be okay. I mean, he's Batman. He's a solidly successful Batman, and he got good reviews off of this. I mean, the review scores are not great, but I think most people thought Robert Pattinson did a good job, myself included. But he can't make too many more of these, right? I mean, thankfully, he has Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, who's not in The Odyssey, but I'm glad he's in it, and the Batman Part 2 coming up. But don't worry, he's also still making a lot of weird shit, but it better get better critic and audience scores. So over on streaming, while season 2 of The Night Agent remains strong in its third week on these charts, season 2 of The Recruit fell, and it fell hard, which I think is one of the reasons, if not the main reason, it was canceled. A lot of you said, hey, these shows should be able to coexist because one's a drama and one's a comedy. But I wonder if The Recruit wouldn't have fallen so hard if The Night Agent wasn't airing simultaneously. Again, they look very similar to me. And Amy Schumer, amazingly, has the only movie that was able to make it into the overall top 10. Career resurgence or just the power of Netflix. Either way, she's going to get something else off of this because, hey, numbers are numbers, and she's the face of those numbers. But things are really interesting over on the originals chart, where Invincible is here. Season 2 never could chart. And animation overall has struggled post-pandemic to chart. But here we are with Invincible Season 3. So this is not only great for this show, but gives hope to other adult animated shows that haven't been canceled. Although, speaking of animation, still no Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on this chart. I'm very curious to see if and where Daredevil performs, once Nielsen catches up. So far behind! Severance and Paradise continue to be the hot shows of the moment, as in they're not on Netflix and they're not binges, yet they're still able to chart. That's amazing. These are non-Netflix shows that release weekly, and they're still doing incredibly well. And while Landman and American Primeval have finally fallen off, Squid Game is still here. A lot of hate for Squid Game when it came out, but the numbers are insane. I mean, it was a binge, it dropped all at once, and it dropped in late December, and here we are in early February, and it's still charting. With movies, still nothing happening in this space. Although, when Nielsen catches up, we'll see how The Electric State does, considering Netflix spent so much money on it. Are you going to watch The Electric State on Netflix? It hits this Friday, even with that Rotten Tomatoes score? And why? Why would you still watch it if you are going to still watch it? All right, on Netflix's own charts, oddly, there's only one Netflix original film in the movies chart, and everything else is, a studio fare that Netflix is able to air. Which is interesting because remember when they started streaming services and Netflix was making so much money, all the studios pulled their content because they were like, we want to make that much money off of it. So that's why Netflix even had to create originals in the first place. But it seems slowly but surely, I guess because Netflix still has the most subscribers, studios still put their content on there. And we were just talking about how much it's helped Warner Brothers. But it's odd that to have only one Netflix original movie on here. With shows, Zero Day was able to save a little face with its first full week on Netflix's charts, but still, the similar Paradise from Hulu has blown this out of the water. Meanwhile, Running Point just got renewed, and this was just for its first few days, these numbers. We'll see next week. We'll see what its first full week on Netflix looks like. And maybe it looks amazing, but there are other reasons that shows get renewed. Like bringing in new subscribers. That's a big factor for shows. How many more people does it get to subscribe to the service? That can be sometimes more valuable than the views itself. High completion rate. Do people watch the show all the way through? Also, maybe it's a relatively low budget compared to The Electric State. It's like, it could be just a fraction of the cost. And they're like, people are watching this too. Streaming has a totally different measuring stick, which is just another reason that they're throwing Hollywood out of whack. And the SAG Awards, pretty low down, right? But for Netflix, that ceremony, speaking of cheap, is probably very cheap to produce, particularly compared to the other things that they make. And it's worth it, not so, that little money that they do spend is worth it not so much for viewership numbers, but for the social media engagements. Remember, Sabrina Carpenter, when she said she had her special, she said Netflix told her all they cared about was social media engagement. And SAG, as do all awards shows, do very well on social media. In fact, a lot of people watch a lot of content through clips on social media. I think that's even happening to some degree a little bit with Saturday Night Live. So it would be interesting to know how Hollywood measures that success factor. Because I think it's still very hard to make money off of social media. Maybe Hollywood's found a way. And they are going back to advertising on X, interestingly enough, with the new Trump administration. Then on digital, with Apple TV, Anora has surged here too after all its Oscar wins, and a number of other Oscar contenders. People also still checked in on those as well. And then Family Fare is doing well. Why is Den of Thieves so high up there? Well, it's now available to rent for just $6. Are you going to get on that? Okay, so as for this coming week, the big new movie is Novocaine. Hollywood, are you even trying? All right, so there's Novocaine. I saw it on Thursday. I'll review it this week. There's also Black Bag from Steven Soderbergh. You know, that movie intrigues me. I might review it. But, you know, Steven Soderbergh, he lost pretty much all of his goodwill from audiences. He just had something come out, like some kind of horror movie that not too many people watched. I'd be curious to see, you know, this has more star power, and we'll see if audiences, you know, give him a chance in theaters, you know, in theaters, I think is the big, you know, again, you know, we'll wait for Black Bag to watch it on digital or streaming. There's also a new A24 film, Opus, the Looney Tunes movie, not released by Warner Brothers, but at least they didn't kill it, and documentary October 8th. Then, shockingly, I'm very shocked by this, Samara Weaving and Ray Nicholson's new horror comedy is going straight to digital on Friday. I mean, it's playing in a theater here or there, like one showtime a day, but it's going to digital. I think that could have taken on Novocaine for sure, don't you? I mean, Ray Nicholson is in both movies, interestingly enough. But that to me I'm really surprised that movie went straight to digital. As for streaming movies, Moana 2 finally comes to Disney Plus on Wednesday. They sure take their sweet time, but people are willing to wait. Have you been waiting for Moana 2 until it hit Disney Plus? Wednesday's the day. On Thursday, Hulu has Control Freak and Max has The Parenting. While on Friday, as I said, there's The Electric State on Netflix. So you can see if it really is that bad. And where did that $320 million go? I'm sure some of it went. One of the reasons, by the way, that streaming movies are so expensive is they have to pay the back end up front, you know, the supposed back end. Because usually stars have back end deals. But since there is no back end in streaming, the bonuses come up front. Although considering how bad some streaming ratings are these days, that seems like not a good system anymore. But I think in some places it's still happening. I bet you a lot of that money went to the Russos, Chris Pratt, and Millie Bobby Brown. It could be as much as $100 million if that went to them. For what? All right, so we'll see what the numbers are. With shows, John Mulaney is back on Netflix with another late night talk show. This one airing live on Wednesday nights. It's weekly, starting this week, and it will air for 3 months, 12 weeks. You know, Conan might have gotten the Oscars gig, and John Mulaney was offered it first, but he turned it down. But seeing this, it makes me wonder, is Mulaney drinking Conan's milkshake? I think he is. I really think he is, actually. And if maybe that's how they're pitching Mulaney as the new Conan. And I think his numbers actually reflect that. I guess there can only be one, like Highlander. Then on Thursday, The Wheel of Time returns to Prime Video with season 3, still alive. And Apple TV has yet another new show, this time from Ridley Scott, starring Brian Tyree Henry and Wagner Moura. What? Why doesn't Apple TV promote this stuff? That sounds fantastic. What do they think they are, Netflix? That's just crazy to me. I watched the trailer right after I wrote these notes, and I was like, what the heck is this? And I watched the trailer, and it looks great. I mean, it looks low budget, but it looks very good. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And how is Hollywood going to get its act back together? How are they going to make people care about them again? Or at least not hate them? All right, share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.